Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on December 19th, 2025. The post date on the social media platform that you are watching this video on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. The next 24 minutes of this video is an introduction that I am placing at the beginning of a dozen or so videos. This introduction regards the prophetic signs that occurred on October 30th and 31st, 2025. If you have already watched this introduction in another video, you can skip ahead no more than 24 minutes from this point. All right, it is predicted that famous singer Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on December 19th, 2025. This email was composed, as we can see here, on November 15th. Prior to October 30th and October 31st, 2025, it was predicted that Paul Simon would slip and fall and injure his head on October 30th, and it was predicted that the news of this would first be reported on October 31st. God orchestrated a myriad of connections from other prophetic signs in order to confirm this analysis for October 30th and 31st. In other words, these connections from the other prophetic signs were known in advance of October 30th and 31st to be pointing to October 30th and 31st. On October 30th and 31st, we received clear prophetic signs that are related to Paul Simon. October 30th and 31st was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is predicted to be on November 27th, 9 plus 9 plus 9 days after October 31st. All right. November 27th, 2025, also ended up being another step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is now predicted to be on December 19th. And we know this, the date December 19th, because of the prophetic signs that occurred on November 27th and other connections. Just like how we knew November 27th ahead of time because of the signs that occurred on October 30th and 31st, which the rest of this 18-minute introduction will explain. This introduction is extremely important. None of the videos, every minute of them, cannot be skipped. The reason why God does these, this is how it works. It works on the principle of interconnected signs. None of God's prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs. And God does this in order to tell, for a very good reason, and that is to tell these stories that he wouldn't otherwise be able to tell without these interconnected signs that develop these stories through the information, through the themes and connections. And it is through these stories that God is communicating extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. Now, it's not complicated if you don't want it to be. In other words, if you are a skeptic and you don't want this prediction to be true, fair enough. Well, not fair enough. You are a completely irrational person when the prediction comes to pass on December 19th. Okay, but I'm going to explain how it works. And in this introduction, we now have two steps that were known ahead of time. It's not complicated. October 30th and 31st, and then once these dates came to pass, we received the clear and relevant prophetic signs that ended up pointing to November 27th, as I mentioned, which was 9 plus 9 plus 9 days after October 31st. And I'll explain why that's extremely irrelevant. You will see. Stay with me. Now, on October 27th, I'm just going to state briefly here, I'll explain it more in another video, or videos plural. We had the prophetic sign, one of them being the bat, the baseball bat. Paul Simon is known to be an avid baseball fan, as is the Antichrist, known to be a fan of the Chicago White Sox, which is why the fan of the Chicago White Sox, the first black president, who is the second of two Antichrists, was given as a gift a baseball bat from the historic legendary Chicago White Sox player, who was number 2, wore jersey number 2, and his name was Nellie Fox, and it was given to the first American Pope on his plane as he was departing Rome on his first international trip abroad to 2 nations. So God uses firsts in general for prophetic signs. Here we have the first black president from Chicago, who was an avid baseball fan of the Chicago White Sox. Everyone knows that, right? He threw out the first pitch in the playoffs. He famously wore his Chicago outfit when he threw the first pitch for the baseball team in Washington when he got booed for it. He also threw out the first pitch while wearing his Chicago stuff at the All-Star game after he became president. Okay, so he's Mr. Chicago White Sox, right? And anyway, he is also from Chicago, just like the first American Pope. And this number 2 bat was given to the Pope, the first American Pope, who is from Chicago, at the beginning of his 2-nation trip. So that gave us the number 22, which is a number that God uses in his signs to symbolize the mark of the Antichrist, which the Antichrist will enforce. And he also pairs 9 and 22 together. So this 9 plus 9 plus 9 days is followed with this sign that gives us the number 22. And it is 22 days from November 27th to December 19th, the date that is predicted that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head. And that's because the mark of the Antichrist will injure people's heads. And I should just, add why the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist is because in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 9, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described, and that would have been a Tav mark. The Tav letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the 22nd and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark of the Antichrist changes or alters a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes come in pairs of 2, and each chromosome has 2 arms, and so 2 and 2. And so that is enough for now. Like I said, I'll explain more about what happened on November 27th in another video. There's, of course, a lot more to this. I'm just saying this now just simply to establish how this works and how we get from October 30th and 31st, December 19th. Okay, now the rest of this video must be watched. I mean the rest of this introduction to this video, which will explain how October 31st connected to November 27th with 9 plus 9 plus 9 days. I won't explain how, I'll explain why. I'll explain how this is important. First of all, God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is the number 9, as from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. What do I mean by step in the trail of signs? Well, God's prophetic signs, none of them can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs, something that is mostly missed by other people that are interested in God's signs. And this is also why the vast majority of God's signs are completely unknown and missed and are only being talked about on this channel. The reason why God does this is he is able to tell stories through the big picture of signs and interconnected signs that he wouldn't otherwise be able to tell from one single prophetic sign isolated on its own. That's why these signs are not recognized in general by other so-called watchers, and the signs that are recognized are not fully appreciated or understood. The reason why God tells these stories is in order to communicate extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know, that is only being communicated or explained, I should say, on this channel. And for example, there was a tremendous theme that God was using for October 30th and 31st, Halloween, that God didn't, I assume, I can gather, want to use for the final date of Paul Simon's fall and then death. These signs and this theme of Halloween are extremely important, and you will see what I am talking about when you watch these other videos, including probably this video, because what I'm doing right now is making an introduction to these other videos that predicted October 30th and 31st. In other words, there are about 10 other videos that must be watched, every minute of them. And when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that they do need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. When the prediction comes to pass that Paul Simon will fall and hit his head and injure his head on November 27th, and it being reported on November 28th, it will prove all of the analysis for October 30th and 31st, 9 plus 9 plus 9 days ahead of the predicted fall. And the reason why that's important is because this will prove all of the information in these other 10 videos that God was telling through these stories that he designed to lead up to October 30th and 31st. He didn't do this for any reason at all. He did this for extremely important reasons. And so that's the purpose of a step in the trail of signs. It further paints the picture and enables God to tell these stories. And these stories could not be possibly told without these steps that served to connect the other prophetic signs in the big picture web of God's signs. Believe me, I know far better than anyone the purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove the things that I am saying in these videos, and especially the controversial things that I am saying, which will be proven to be true because they are proven beyond a doubt through God's big picture of signs, which in turn will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. And so hopefully I have made it clear why God did this for October 30th and 31st. In other words, what I'm about to explain in the next couple of minutes is an explanation for the prophetic signs that occurred on October 31st and 30th, and which are these dates that we expected such signs in advance of these dates. And when the prediction comes to pass on November 27th, it will prove that October 30th and 31st were indeed steps in the trail of signs, and therefore all of the analysis for October 30th and 31st that was explained in advance of these dates is 100% correct. To not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, the point of this video, and the point of the videos on this channel. You might as well turn this video off. If you do not appreciate this, you are wasting your time. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So that's, again, why it is that this video must be watched, and the rest of this video will talk about how God pointed to October 30th and 31st ahead of time, and now you understand why he did this and why it is important that you learn what God did to point to these dates ahead of time. Because what God did to point to these dates ahead of time are the stories that contain the knowledge that you need to know. On October 30th and 31st, we received clear prophetic signs that are related to Paul Simon, as we expected in advance of these dates. October 30th and 31st was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is predicted to be on November 27th, 9 plus 9 plus 9 days after October 31st. Elvis Presley famously covered Simon's Bridge Over Troubled Water song, and Presley died from the effects of his fall in his mansion when he hit his head on a porcelain bathtub. Most people don't know this, but professionals believe that the true reason for Elvis Presley's death was not him taking drugs, but the drugs were taken to deal with the side effects from the severe head injury he had 10 years earlier in 1967, when he fell in his bathroom and hit his head on his porcelain bathtub and was unconscious for an unknown period of time. This, in turn, caused over the years increasingly severe autoimmune diseases as a result of the brain injury. And that's all related to, guess you know what? The Thing, and we will talk about that in these videos. The thing that causes autoimmune diseases. Now, Paul Simon's best-selling album is titled Graceland. His song Graceland is about his journey with his young son to visit the King of Rock, Elvis Presley, the King of Rock and Roll's mansion, Graceland Mansion, in the 4x4th state. Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, Egypt, and Memphis, Tennessee is located in the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt. Elvis Presley, incidentally, has a hit song named Little Egypt from his 9th soundtrack album, no less. The King of Rock's Graceland Mansion in Memphis is symbolic, and I say that because of the 4x4th state and the number 9, and I'm getting ahead of myself here because God pairs 9 and 44 together. So hold on a second. The King of Rock's Graceland Mansion in Memphis is symbolic of the King of Egypt's palace. And in the Bible, the King of Egypt is a type for the Antichrist king. The Antichrist king, who will reside in the White House mansion that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and is located at 4x400 Pennsylvania Avenue. This Antichrist king is the 44th president, and he was inaugurated in the year 09. This is why in his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, God pairs the numbers 9 and 44 together. On October 30th, King Charles, and by the way, in the Bible, the Israelites escaped the persecution from the King of Egypt, and likewise the Pilgrims escaped the persecution from the King of England, which is King Charles. On October 30th, King Charles formally stripped, and Paul Simon sang about the Pilgrims in his song American Tune. On October 30th, King Charles formally, this date that we knew in advance, to relate to Paul Simon, who God is using to point to the King of Rock and Roll. Okay, so on October 30th, King Charles formally stripped Prince Andrew of his royal titles. One of the main stories on October 31st, the following day, was the question of what would become of Prince Andrew's mansion. And also on this day, news broke that Prince Andrew had hired 40 prostitutes in 4 days while he was in the royal kingdom of Thailand. 40 prostitutes in 4 days hints at the number 44. In his signs, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 to confirm his signs and connections. And by the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. And I know these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. Okay, and so the reason for 23 and 44 is because the 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball. And also the thing alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, the mark of the Antichrist. The 44th president is the Antichrist. So in his signs, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm his signs and connections. The news of Prince Andrew's 40 prostitutes in 4 days in the Royal Kingdom of Thailand was exactly 2 times 300 days after Prince William and Prince Harry visited the King of Rock's Graceland estate and mansion in the 4 times 4th state. And again, the news on this day was Prince Andrew's mansion. And exactly 2,300, or 2 times 300, I should say, days prior, the princes visited the King's Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state. That's a pairing of 23 and 44. Furthermore, it pairs with the 40 prostitutes in 4 days at the other end of this timeline. Okay, now this 2 times 300 days is the equivalent of exactly 4,200 days. And in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist king's rule is symbolized by 42 months. Also, on October 31st, Trump, God's trumpet for prophetic signs, trumpeted that he had renovated the Lincoln bathroom in the White House mansion that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. President Lincoln was the 4 times 4th president. Also on October 31st, Trump had an interview in his mansion in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state, Florida, with CBS for the first time since his $4 times $4 million lawsuit with this news company. That's another pairing of 9 and 44. The 9 plus 9 plus 9th state and the $4 times $4 million lawsuit. These signs on October 31st that hinted at the number 44, again, the 40 prostitutes in 4 days, and the Lincoln bathroom named after the 4 times 4th president in the White House mansion, which has 44 plus 44 rooms and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay, these signs on October 31st that hinted at the number 44, including the sign in Trump's mansion in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state, are 9 plus 9 plus 9 days before Simon is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head in his house or mansion, if you will, on Thanksgiving on November 27th, 2025. The 4 times 4th president formally began the tradition of celebrating Thanksgiving on the 4th Thursday of the month of November. November is Latin for 9. The renovation of the bathroom in the White House mansion that is named after the 4 times 4th president hints at how Elvis died in his bathroom in his Graceland mansion from the effects of the fall that he had in his bathroom in his mansion years earlier. Likewise, Simon, who sang about the Graceland mansion, is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head and ultimately die from his head injury. Okay, I should also add that the Graceland mansion is in the 4 times 4th state. And so the renovation in the bathroom of the White House mansion that is named after the 4 times 4th president hints at how Elvis died in his bathroom in the Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state, from the effects of the fall he had in his bathroom in his mansion years earlier. Likewise, Simon, who sang about the Graceland mansion, is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head, like Elvis did, and ultimately die from his head injury. Also on October 31st, Trump, God's trumpeted that the U.S. is considering conducting a military raid in support of the persecuted Christians in Nigeria, Africa. Simon's Graceland album was controversial because he visited South Africa during apartheid and he used South African musical influences in his songs on the album. One of the released singles from the album is Under African Skies. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will fall and severely injure his head on October 30th, 2025. And this will be first reported in the news on October 31st, 2025. And it is predicted that he will die from his head injury on November 5th, 2025. It is also predicted that the Obamas will return to the White House on January 20th, 2029. And it is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio de Janeiro that will be reported around the world on the date March 22nd, 2029. The date that this video is posted on the social media platform that you are watching this on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, this video is a continuation of the must-watch The Shining video. I made a video regarding the theme of the movie The Shining, and this is essentially a continuation of that, but there is so much more to this. In fact, it's completely different. They're just connected. And what I mean to say is that I highly recommend that you watch the Shining video first and then come back to watch this video. But of course, when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that every minute of every video on this channel must be watched. I just recommend that you watch these videos in this order: The Shining and then this Final Solution WANSI conference video. But of course, again, also, the titles of these videos are just titles. These videos on this channel are about far more than just the titles. And this is because these videos require titles, but really God's big picture of signs is vast and interconnected. But anyway, make sure you watch the Shining video also and come back and watch this video after. I recommend anyway. All right, so there's more here. Now, Chico was played by a man named Freddie Prinz, P-R-I-N-Z. One thing that I forgot to mention is that Chico the man, as I explained, hints at both of the two antichrists. These two men, these were the main characters of the show were two individuals, two men. Okay, one of them was 22 years old, which hints at the mark of the Antichrist, and the name Chico hints at the locations of the two antichrists that God is using to symbolize them, to point to them. San Francisco and Chicago, as I explained. Okay, but what I forgot to mention too, or I did mention, is that the Chico and the man hints at the man of sin, one of the titles of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. But also one of the titles is the coming prince, the prince who is to come. And that's why this actor's name is Prinze, P-R-I-N-Z-E. I don't know how you pronounce it. It could even in fact be pronounced as Prince. I don't know. But it definitely rhymes with Prince nonetheless. Now, he shot himself, but he actually had a kid, I guess shortly before he died. And he became a famous actor himself. And he became famous through a movie called, and his name is Freddie Prinze Jr., by the way. He became famous through a slasher movie, I Know What You Did Last Summer. And he followed up his character in the sequels as well. This movie was so big that it had sequels. So I Know What You Did Last Summer was a big movie in the 2000s, and it starred this Chico actor's son. Okay? So we have a continuation, in other words, of the prophetic sign that is Freddie Prinze with Freddie Prinze Jr., and Freddie Prinze again shot himself, as in the mark of the Antichrist, SHOTs, and blood. And then we have this guy starring in a slasher movie. The movie I Know What You Did Last Summer is credited with reviving the slasher movie genre. Okay, and what can I tell you? That's obviously Antichrist symbolism, and but also it's symbolic of injecting things, if you know what I mean. Slashing, injecting, same idea, really. Okay, now another thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that, what do we have? Well, there's a lot of information. There's so much. Actually, stay tuned. Do not get bored here, because there's so much important, profound information to come. I'm actually adding on to this video the following day. An equivalent amount of profound information has come this morning, and so rather than make another video with basically the same theme, because it's still all about the ballroom, I'm just going to add it onto this video. But you need to keep watching, okay? Now, the one thing that I didn't or failed to mention yesterday regarding this assassination of JFK as he was driving onto the on-ramp for the I-35 is that JFK was the 35th president. Okay, so that's more confirmation of the significance of him driving onto the I-35. Again, it's 5 times 7, which is the fifth of 7 trumpets and 5G frequencies that will lead to demonic people being demonically possessed through their brains, which is why JFK, the 35th president, was shot in the head. And again, the demonic possession will be the result of shots. Now, we talked about Chico the Man, and we got led to it through Scatman Crothers, who played Louis for 4 seasons in this show. This is how the Lord revealed this show in the first place, because Scatman Crothers, again, was the actor from the movie The Shining. Now, what I didn't mention is that The Shining was released on Scatman Crothers' 70th birthday. And it wasn't released because it was his birthday. That's ridiculous, right? Furthermore, movies are released on Fridays, and that would mean, you know, that, well, okay, come on. So, no, the directors, the producers of the movie didn't go, hey, you know what? Hey, your birthday's this day, let's release it on that day. But 70 is a very prophetic number in Bible prophecy, and it is symbolic of judgment on a nation. For example, the Israelites were exiled to Babylon for 70 years. All right, now here, from here on out, I'm going to just go into my email, the emails that I sent to my friend as the insights were coming. I attempted to map it all out with a rough sketch onto a piece of paper, the connections that I'm about to explain, but it's not necessary to do so, and there's just too much anyway. So I'm just going to go through it. But one thing I'll just add here before getting into the email is that we are talking about the movie The Shining here. And as you can see in this diagram, we don't have a connection from the release date of the movie The Shining, which it should have. And there's so much more, okay? But also, the thing about The Shining, which was something that was realized when Shelley Duvall died in July of 2024, is that the movie The Shining is ultimately pointing back to, and this was something that was forgotten until just this morning, the Wannsee Conference that was in a mansion outside of Berlin, in a hall, which was where the Nazis gathered to discuss the final solution for the Jews. They gathered there to discuss genocide. Bible prophecy says that there is coming persecution from the Antichrist of God's faithful, of Christians, and also Jews. In specifically also Judea. There's a coming genocide on both groups. And also, if you want to include into that group Jews worldwide, but God's people. And the coming genocide is being, you can say that because it is in the process already. You can look up on the internet the 10 stages of genocide and clearly see that the left is in the middle to late stages of perpetrating their genocide on true conservatives and Christians. We've just had a temporary reprieve here with the miracle of Trump's election, but it will get going again once Trump leaves office. And also, Trump is not knowingly laying down some of the groundwork for this to happen, including the rounding up of illegal aliens, which will lead to the rounding up of conservatives and Christians who refuse to take the mark of the Antichrist, for example. And the Wannsee Conference is what's being pointed at here with The Shining, because The Shining is about a hall, or rather it's about a ballroom, which is a hall, and it's about a large hotel, which is symbolic of a mansion. And the Wannsee Conference was held in this particular hall in a mansion in 1942. And the thing about the movie The Shining is that there are a bunch of 42 coincidences. For example, there is a view of the hotel from the outside in the movie in which there are 42 cars parked. Danny is wearing, at times in the movie, a shirt that has the number 42 on his sleeves. And in Bible prophecy, the number 42 is symbolic of the Antichrist, or the period of the Antichrist. And, well, the sleeves are the shoulders where the 42 number is, and that's where things are put into people. And I'm forgetting maybe another example or two of the coincidence of the number 42 in the movie The Shining. But it does point back to, and it was in the movie The Overlook Hotel. And the Wannsee Conference location was chosen because of it overlooking the lake near Berlin. It was an overlook hotel. And so that's another reason how the Overlook Mansion and the movie The Shining hints at this. Now, of course, the Holocaust was demonic. It was Satan. And so that's also why this movie that is about demonic possession ties to the Wannsee Conference. Okay? And so Shelley Duvall, her name rhymes with Hall, and Paul Simon and Shelley Duvall met on the movie set of Annie Hall. Annie Hall was named by Woody Allen after the actress Diane Keaton. I figured this out on my own. It's not anywhere, but it's quite obvious, because Diane hints at Annie, and Diane Keaton's maiden name was Diane Hall. So that's where the name Annie Hall comes from. Well, anyway, you could argue that the death of Diane Keaton was the death of Diane Hall. And Shelley Duvall stars in this movie that God is using, which is about a hall, a ballroom hall. Anyway, these two actresses died exactly 13 plus 2 months apart. One on the date July 11th and the other on October 11th. Why 13 plus 2 months? That's because the White House has 132 rooms. And the White House is a mansion. And Trump is attaching a new ballroom to the White House mansion. 132 is 44 plus 44 plus 44. And God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The 44th president is the Antichrist, who will dwell in the White House that had 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Pennsylvania is where the 4th plane hit at a 40-degree angle in a 40-acre pit, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, and killed 44 people. The Antichrist is the 44th president, who will be like a Hitler orchestrating a genocide. The final solution, if you will, to what Hillary Clinton called the deplorables, to what Justin Trudeau called or said, do we really want to put up with these people, etc. Okay, and the final solution was at this location that was located with the address 58, and that's the number of deaths in the deadliest mass shooting in history in Las Vegas, and which was perpetrated from the 32nd floor. The 32nd prime number is 131. G131 is the word for blood disease. On the same day O.J. Simpson was released from jail in Las Vegas, he wore number 32 when he played football, and he was known, of course, for bloody murder. He drove infamously down Route or Highway 31, and the shooter shot the people at the festival named Route 31. Harvest Music Festival Route 31 or something to that effect. Route 31 Music Festival. Route 91 and Highway 91. Anyway, mass shootings are symbolic of the masses taking the things, the SHOTs, which is why, and that's also a parallel with the Holocaust, the final solution, which is why the location of 58, which is why 58 people died in basically a sort of Holocaust, if you will, with the deadliest mass shooting in history. Okay, so I don't really see any other way to tackle this information other than to simply go through the notes that I was writing to my friend as they came here, the insights this morning. And bear with me. This will all be explained one way or another, and it's not very complicated though. So it's just not going to be necessarily in the perfect order. But there's really no way to determine even what would be the perfect order, because it's all part of God's signs, which is an interconnected web. It's all circular. It's all interconnected anyway. So anyway, on this day, September 23rd, 2015, the two antichrists met in the White House garden. Okay, and that's symbolic for many. Okay. So Obama gave Francis a gift when he first visited him at the Vatican of a box of seeds from the White House garden in appreciation for Francis being the first pope to open the papal gardens to the public. When Francis came to the U.S., he visited Madison Square Gardens and delivered Mass there. And they met in the White House garden because the serpent met Eve in the garden. Now, the two antichrists met in the White House garden on this date, and this date points to Obama because he was inaugurated in 2009 and he was the basketball president who wore number 23. But this was exactly 6 plus 6 plus 6 months, which is 4 sixes, which hints at the 4 beasts in Bible prophecy, leading to the beast that is the Antichrist. Okay, and that gets us to this date, this 9/23 date, again in 2017, which was the day of the fulfillment of the great sign in heaven, quote unquote, in Revelation chapter 12, which is the rapture sign, when God's faithful will be rescued. Now this date in turn is exactly 97 months to this October 23rd date that just passed yesterday. Okay, and that's relevant because 97 is the 25th prime number, And the news stories, again, are about how the ballroom will cost $250 million. And that's because the number 25 in Bible prophecy is symbolic of the Temple Mount in the future, the Messianic Temple Mount, which the Antichrists will be on, as described in Bible prophecy. So that's why we have the connection from the Antichrists here to this date, which is also the meeting of these two men, the Pope Leo and King Charles. Okay, so we have the meeting of the two men in, by the way, the capitals of the two Antichrists. This meeting was in Washington. This profoundly connects to this meeting in the Vatican, or at the Vatican, the two seats of power of the two Antichrists. Okay, now Leo is a confirmation of this connection with symbol, which hints at the four beasts, because Leo hints at lion, which is one of the four beasts in Bible prophecy, in this prophecy. Revelation 13:2. Okay, now King Charles was crowned 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days exactly after the Queen's funeral. That's because King Charles is lowercase a Antichrist symbolism. He is not the Antichrist. Neither is Pope Leo. And when this prediction comes to pass, that Paul Simon will slip and fall on October 30th, and the news of it being reported on the 31st, and then die on November 5th, it will prove what I am saying. And it is time, therefore, as I probably mentioned already, for the evangelicals to quit playing the Antichrist guessing game. It's silly. And it is a result of ignorance, which means lack of knowledge, of God's signs, which will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. And the signs are, there's just basic ones. Like Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. And everyone should know that, especially if they think of themselves as someone who's interested in prophecy and watching for signs. I'm sure you do know that, but you still continue to play the guessing game anyway. And why is that? Well, because of your dogma regarding your incorrect interpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which says that the Antichrist's identity will not be revealed until some vague event when supposedly the Holy Spirit is removed from the earth, which will never happen. Paul was not referring to the Holy Spirit there. He spoke of it as a he and a what that was holding back the Antichrist. Why would he speak of the Holy Spirit as a he and a what? Why would he speak cryptically? Why did he say to the Thessalonians that they knew what he was talking about? The reason is because if they were in possession of the letter, they would be in trouble had he spoken plainly, because he was referring to Rome. And how the Rome, the what, was moved by Constantine, the he, to Constantinople, which paved the way, cleared the way for the rise of power of the bishops of Rome, which became popes. And there wouldn't have been a Reformation without that knowledge. Anyway, so Barak means lightning, Bama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as for example, it said Lucifer fell from the high place, which is a metaphor for heaven. And then also, O, the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, means from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew there would be a famous president and said this anyway, no, it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so stop playing the Antichrist guessing game. Okay, and so it's not King Charles. Okay, it's not. Just because of some guy's, quirky interpretation of the coat of arms doesn't override all of the massive amounts of prophetic signs. And this connection here also does not confirm that in any way that Charles is the Antichrist. It's just symbolism because he's a king. But he's also, I believe, one of the 10 kings in Bible prophecy that are under the Antichrist, that give their power to the Antichrist. Okay, that's clear. Same with Emmanuel Macron. He's one of the 10 kings. He's not the Antichrist. So when when God is, using these men from time to time, very sporadically compared, not even a fraction of the amount compared to the use of signs for Obama, and to a lesser extent Pope Francis, who will be resurrected in April of 2029. Okay, so I just want to get that clear, okay? So it's not King Charles who is the Antichrist, even though we have this connection. Now, but but we do have these two men who symbolize the Antichrist, because Leo is not the Antichrist either. But anyway, they connect with the meaning of the two Antichrists, as I've just explained. Now, the thing about Leo and Charles is he is the 14th and Charles is the 3rd. Well, that, first of all, hints at Isaiah 31:4, which speaks of a lion and speaks of Mount Zion, where the Antichrist will be and where he will be defeated at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. So that's why Leo, and that's why he's the 14th and Charles is the 3rd. Their coming together here is a massive sign. They were both set up for this sign here. That's how important this is. And it coincides with the ballroom signs, but it also connects with the meeting of the two Antichrists here. It's very important. I am sure there will be further connections from this October 23rd date, which, by the way, again, also connects with the rapture sign. By the way, the rapture sign date begins with a 9 and ends with a 7, and it also connects with this 97 months here. But it, again, hints at the Temple Mount. Okay, so what else does 14 and 3 give us? It gives us 17. 14 plus 3. 17 is amazing because the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. This metaphor of the beast that describes the Antichrist. 7 heads and 10 horns, well, 10 plus 7 is 17. That's why God uses the number 17 for this purpose, to symbolize this, to hint at this. Okay, so that's another thing. Now, the other thing, too, is that 14 times 3, King Charles III, Leo the 14th, gives us 42, which hints at the, well, Wannsee Conference, which was in 1942. But again, 42 is the number in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist. And it is only symbolic. For those that are looking for a beginning, a literal beginning of a 42 months, you can stop that. Well, that's not to say that there won't be, but definitely the symbolic beginning of the 7 years is already passed. And I'm not going to explain it again. And so the wise person will recognize that when this prediction comes to pass, they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. So they gave each other titles. Charles was named Royal Brother of St. Paul's Basilica outside the walls. The date that they met was 156 days after Leo exited the walls of the Basilica of the Vatican and visited St. Paul's Basilica outside the walls. Okay, and that was on this date, May 20th, 2025, which was the day that Mr. Dorr died. Well, who was Mr. Dorr? That would be George Wendt, who starred on Cheers and was known for coming through the Cheers bar door and giving a funny one-liner before sitting on his stool and then drinking a beer. But the door was at the bottom of a stairwell, which is symbolic of the bottomless pit. Cheers is a play on that because it's obviously the opposite of cheerful, the bottomless pit. But the door is symbolic of the door that the demons will pass through that will be unlocked with the key. And Paul Simon composes music with keys. Music keys. He was born in 41, and key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. Okay, and all right, so I just realized while I was recording there that I didn't check the connection between Mr. Dorday and Leo outside the walls of the basilica, or at the outside of the walls basilica. Well, first of all, outside the walls is a hint at Trump, because Trump is about his border wall of security. In the first presidency and election campaign, it was literally about the wall, the southern border wall, but this presidency is about his tariffs, which is about the border wall of security also, symbolically. It's also a hint at the tares that God is, anyway, that's biblical, the separation of the wheat from the tares. Okay, so the day of the Wannsee Conference to discuss the final solution, which is what is hinted at with The Shining, as I have just explained, on January 20th, 1942, was exactly 1,000 months before Mr. Dorr died and Pope Leo went outside the Vatican walls to the St. Paul's Basilica outside the walls. Basilica. Okay, now, this 1,000 months hints at the 1,000 years of peace that will commence with the defeat of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. But this is also 500 plus 500 months. The 500th word in the Greek concordance, Strong's, is Antichrist. 2 sets of 500 gives us a connection from Hitler, who is symbolic of the Antichrist, to the Antichrist, or if you will, the two Antichrists, Pope Francis and Barack Obama. This is also followed by 5 months to Trump, Mr. Wall. Trump is the Mr. Wall. This is a Mr. Dorr, okay? To Trump and the beginning of the demolition of the ballroom. And again, the Wannsee Conference was held in a ballroom. It was held in a hall in the mansion, and Trump began demolition of the mansion for the ballroom on October 20th, exactly 1,005 months. Now, I recognized that already, but I didn't realize that didn't mean anything. But you would figure there would be a connection because they're both on the 20th of the month, and we are talking about the shining hinting at the ballroom and vice versa, Trump's ballroom. But that, like I just realized this morning or remembered this morning, is all about pointing to the Wannsee Conference. And so you would figure, given that the Wannsee Conference was on a 20th of the month, that there would be a connection. And when I typed it in, when I input the dates, it was 1,005 months. And I was like, oh, maybe there's an intermediate connection, which there is. But, and this is it. Actually, there's other. What I mean is, there's another one. There's other ones, but this is the profound one. Well, no, they're all profound. I take that back. But anyway, you get my point here. Is that furthermore, it connects with the Antichrist. Well, Pope Leo is symbolic of the Antichrist, and we have the connection with this 500 number, which means Antichrist. Okay, now. We have also God repeating the number 5 3 times, and he repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And this again hints at the 5th trumpet, in which it's described the demons coming from the bottomless pit to possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, promoted and forced by the Pope Francis, the Antichrist. Okay, so that's another reason for the 500 plus 500 and then 5 months connection through the door, because the 5th trumpet is about the door being opened. Mr. Door. This is the big reason for the death. There's other reasons, but this is, like, from what I recall, arguably perhaps the biggest one. It was all along intended to connect the Wannsee Conference to Trump's ballroom. That's how huge this is. Just to confirm it for you even more, this Mr. Door, and again, the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door, and Mr. Door died on this day exactly 44 months before the return of the 44th president to the White House as the Antichrist. But this day also connects with this number that symbolizes Antichrist. Now we know this. The Wannsee Conference connects to the day Obama will return to the White House. Obama is a Hitler who will lead the political left cult in their genocide on true conservatives and true Christians, as described in Bible prophecy. Do you see how profound this is? Wow. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Charles and Leo met at the Vatican 156 days before Leo visited the basilica outside the walls on the day that Mr. Dorr died. at the bottomless pit, the stairway down to the door to Cheers. The 156 days because the 156th prime number is 911, 911, which is at Revelation 9:11, which is the verse that symbolizes the fifth trumpet judgment. And speaks of specifically King Apollyon, which is why this connects to King Charles. See, God's using King Charles as symbolism. He's not saying that he's the Antichrist. And so we have this connection that implies Revelation 9:11 about King Apollyon connecting to King Charles. Furthermore, it's Leo, and lion is symbolic of king in British royalty. The lion is used as the motif for royalty in the British crown. And I believe that guy who talks about his interpretation of the coat of arms, talking about the lion and the coat of arms and all that. By the way, I just don't recall, but I did study and analyze what that guy was saying before, and it's not true. It's just, it's not. What he's saying is not really that interesting, actually, if you really think about it. Now, the president, here we go. So on the 24th, we have another sign. This was the day it was leaked to the press that people on the inside were referring to the ballroom with its new name, the President Donald J. Trump Ballroom, which is equal to 1948 in Hebrew gematria. And I spelled it out even. Hebrew gematria. That's because Israel was reborn in 1948. And Trump was born exactly 23 months before Israel was reborn. And Israel was reborn exactly 230 plus 230 plus 230 weeks before Obama was born. And God has been using Trump as a trumpet to trumpet Obama, the arrival of the Antichrist, which, if you recall, is how he rose to political heights in the first place through calling out Obama, specifically on his forged birth certificate. Speaking of his birthday, Trump's birthday connects profoundly to Obama's birthday. Again, with exactly 23 months to the birthday of Israel, the modern birthday, which connects with exactly 230 plus 230 plus 230 weeks to Obama's birthday. But that 230 plus 230 plus 230 weeks is also relevant not only because God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and Barack Obama is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school, but it's equal to 69. 6 divided by 9 is 0.666, but the most central prophecy in the Bible regards a period of 69 weeks, as in 690 weeks, which is followed by the period of the Antichrist in the 70th week, which is another reason why the movie The Shining, incidentally, was released on the 70th birthday of Scatman Crothers. Okay, as I wrote here, you might recall that it was believed last year that Duval's death pointed to the hall that was used by the Nazis to discuss the final solution. So I explained that already, and yeah. That's the movie The Shining, and for that purpose. And now we have The Shining connecting to Trump's ballroom ball. But now I've just also explained how the ballroom for the final solution connects to Trump's ballroom and also the day that Obama will return to the White House to conduct his final solution for true conservatives and true Christians. Now, the Wannsee Conference on January 20th, 1942 was exactly 67 years, which is also 804 months. That's a typo. Before Obama was inaugurated the 44th president. Obama was born on the date 8-4. His name, Obama, is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria, And Barack Obama is equal to 408 in English gematria. Okay, 67 was the year, the other most important year in Israel's history, when on the date 6-7 in 1967, Jews recaptured the Temple Mount. And the reason for that is 6 symbolizes man, 7 God, and the Temple Mount is where man meets God. Anyway, this connection to the inauguration of the 44th president from the Wannsee Conference connects with 4 times 4 years, which hints at the 44th president, to this inauguration of Trump, which is in turn 9 months, as I explained earlier in the diagram, 9 pairs with 44, to Trump's ballroom. I explained that connection already. I just didn't know that Obama's inauguration connected with the Wannsee Conference. Well, actually, I did know that. I just forgot because it was over a year ago now that I studied that. And on a daily basis, the prophetic signs from God are like a fire hose. And so it's just something to even keep up. Anyway, that ballroom, the beginning of the demolition, was 4 days before the leak of the name of the ballroom, which gives us 1948. We have 67 and 48 here. The Wannsee Conference, Jews, Israel, Barack Obama, the new Hitler. Oh, and by the way, everything the left says, because Satan gets them to say it, is the exact opposite of the truth. It's not even just like it's not true, but it's uncanny that it's like the flip inverted opposite. So, for example, the left accused Trump of attempting to shoplift the referendum, but they are the ones that did it. The left will accuse Trump of having illegally, so-called classified documents, but Biden actually did it illegally, et cetera, et cetera. It's just all an inverse, right? Including when they say now that Trump is a Hitler. Well, it's because they're the Hitler. It's always them. It's like the cookie. It's like the kid it's like the kid who steals cookies from the cookie jar and then is confronted and said, "No, I didn't steal the cookies, you did," and points at the other person who's accusing the person, even though they did it. That's because the left is like little children. Okay, so is the reason why Duvall died exactly 13 plus 2 months before Keaton Hall because the White House has 132 rooms? Yes. 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms. Yes, that's why. Because, of course, it's the mansion, and we're talking about the ballroom that will be the additional room to the 132 rooms. So Duvall died exactly 13 plus 2 months before Keaton Hall, Diane Keaton, because the White House has 132 rooms, the additional ballroom, which hints at the additional ballroom. And Duvall died at 75 years and Keaton at 79, which is a 4-year difference. Which again hints at door. And the demons through the door in the from the bottomless pit. Well, this is also, let's see. I forget why I put that number there. Let's move on. So Duvall died 470 days, which hints at the 47th president, before the name of the ballroom was released, which is the 47th president's name. That's amazing. Confirmation. Because again, Duvall hints at the Shining, which hints at the hall for the final solution, the Wannsee Conference, which is about the Jews, and they became a nation because of the final solution in 1948. The President Donald Trump J. Ballroom equals what 1948 in Hebrew gematria. So that's an amazing connection there, this 470 days, because it's the 47th president, but specifically the sign is his name, the name of the 47th president, who will be putting his name on the White House mansion, as in the Wannsee Conference mansion. Now, Obama was born Well, I already did this connection. I already talked about this. Like I said, 690 weeks after Israel was born, which is 230 plus 230, and this is 23 months after Trump was born. The Wannsee Conference on January 20th, 1942, as I said, 67 years or 804 months. Let's see. I did all this already. Okay. Here's something new. The Wannsee Conference, which is about the final solution, was exactly 687 months before the symbolic first mass school shooting, the Columbine High School massacre, in which 4 times 4 people were killed, which hints at the 44th president. And incidentally, as I explained earlier, it's 117 months exactly to the inauguration of the 44th president, which was, speaking of 42, exactly 42 months before before the mass shooting in the movie theater in the same state, the Four Corners state that has 4 corners, Colorado, as in the 44th president. 42 months is the period of time that's symbolized for the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. So the 42 months connects to the inauguration, which connects to the date 420, which also hints at 42, which connects to the Wannsee Conference in 1942. Do you understand? The reason for these mass shootings is to point to the final solution and to tie it to Obama. I hope that's appreciated. I just proved it. The Wannsee Conference was in 42, which symbolizes the Antichrist. It connects to this date that hints at 42, which connects to the inauguration of Obama, and then he was the Dark Knight Rises, and then it connects with 42 months to the Dark Knight Rises movie massacre in the Four Corners state that has 4 corners. And that date, by the way, was exactly 444 weeks before the death of player number 44, the home run king, who died 6 plus 6 plus 6 days after he took the mark of the Antichrist on the first day of the 117th Congress, and it is exactly 117 months between this Columbine shooting and the inauguration of the 44th president in the Four Corners state that has 4 corners. To tie it to Jews and Israel, this inauguration of the 44th president was essentially exactly 1,260 years after the deadliest, biggest earthquake in Israel area history in, I believe, 749, I believe, and, or no, 729, or no, I forget the name, I forget the year, it doesn't matter. But it was 1,260 years, and that's because 42 months is 1,260 days in Bible prophecy. And again, so the earthquake connects with 1,260 years to Obama, which then connects to the shooting with 1,260 days. Well, it's 42 months, but in Bible prophecy, a month is 30 days each, and so that gives us 1,260 days. Okay. And I explained 117, it means division. Let it divide, as I explained. Those with the Antichrist and those not, who will be persecuted, and there will be a politicide. The reason why 687 months is relevant is because it's the 67th superprime number, and this is, again, the number about the Temple Mount, the date 67 and 67. Very important for Jewish history, as is the final solution. There wouldn't be a 6/7/1967 recapture of the Temple Mount had it not been for the final solution. Now, the Wannsee Conference was exactly 22 years and 9 months before the birth of Kamala Harris, and she is the 49th vice president, and she will die in a plane crash with Gavin Newsom, which will clear the way for Michelle Obama to become the 49th president. 22 and 9 are paired together because the 9 symbolizes judgment, but in Ezekiel chapter 9, the inverse of the mark is described, and it's with the Tav mark, which is the last and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So 22 years and 9 months exactly, but then also her birthday is in turn 61 years, which is the 6 plus 6 plus 6th prime number, to the demolition of Trump's White House for the ballroom. which is where Michelle Obama will become the president again. In fact, it seems like she will be the first president to have a inauguration ball in the ballroom. Wow. No kidding. No kidding. And that's why. That's why he's connected it through the 49th vice president here. Michelle Obama will have her inauguration ball in the new ballroom. She'll be the first president to do so. I mean, why wouldn't she do it? Because it's named after Trump? That would be silly, right? Now, the Wannsee Conference was exactly 6 + 6 + 6 years, or 6 times 6 times 6 months, or 216 months. And Obama was born on the 216th day of the calendar year, and the name Barack is equal to 216 in English gematria, before the inauguration of John F. Kennedy, who was the 35th president, who was shot, as in Mark of the Antichrist, in the head, as in demonic possession of people's brains, as he was driving onto the I-35. Speaking of 35, the Wannsee Conference was exactly 35 years, which is 42 months, as in the Wannsee Conference in the year 42, before the inauguration of Jimmy Carter, who was the 13 times 13th president, and the ballroom is the 133rd room, if we count it as an additional room. Now, the demolition of the East Wing, I imagine, is removing some rooms, but I don't know if the White House includes, the 132 rooms includes rooms in the White House, I mean the East Wing, or just in the White House proper. So, it could very well be that the White House proper plus this ballroom gives us 133 rooms. Either way, it's symbolic of the case of what I'm explaining here, because it's just symbolism anyway. And 133 is the 44th semi-prime number, which is the 44th president in the White House and the ballroom. Now, Carter is big-time Antichrist symbolism because he penned his book, Peace, Not Apartheid, which is one step away from accusing Israel of committing genocide, like people on the left do today. But Carter is an extreme leftist disguised as a Christian. He is not a Christian. He is an Antichrist. He's not with God. But the irony is that the Democrat Party made him the nominee, because of them seeking votes from the Southerners who were Christians. Anyway, he wrote this book after he took a trip to Gaza, which is interesting because of the prophetic significance of Jimmy Carter, who brokered the Camp David peace accords, which pressured Israel to give back land to Egypt in exchange for peace. Land for peace. This formula that keeps getting repeated but never works. And because the truth is, the conflict cannot be properly understood from a land perspective. It's spiritual. And the truth is that Islam is satanic. And they will never, ever accept Jews in their land, or what they think is their land, which isn't their land, which is a lie. It's God's land, but of course the Jews were there not only before the so-called Palestinians, which is another lie, because the name Palestine didn't get absorbed by the Muslim Arabs until the 80s, the 1980s. But because the land was called Palestine after the emperor renamed it Palestine after the Philistines, one of the enemies of Israel, after he removed all of the Jews from the land. attempting to eliminate Judaism from that area. He renamed it Palestine and destroyed the Temple Mount and put the Temple of Jupiter on top of the ruins, which then was incorporated by the Muslims into the Dome of the Rock today. Anyway, the biggest transgression against God that's described in Bible prophecy is the world ganging up on Israel, seeking to divide God's land, like Jimmy Carter. And so the thing is that in the Bible, King David, as in the King of America, the president, in Camp David peace accords, King David subdued the tribes of the plains of Gaza, which is why Jimmy Carter was known for being from Plains, Georgia, as in Plains of Gaza. And not only is Carter known for being from Plains, he lived his entire life in Plains except for when he was in the governor's mansion and the White House. I mean, he literally is like associated with this small town, like no other president is associated with a small town. It's because of the Plains of Gaza that King David subdued, where the Philistines were. Which is why Carter is part of the satanic plan to persecute Israel. Because the Palestinians, who Carter is all about here, accusing of apartheid, are named after the Philistines, which lived in Gaza, that specific area. Because God, it's like literally that area is where the Philistines were. Now also, Carter forced Israel to return a big chunk of the Gaza area to Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula. Okay, so that's why Carter here. That's why the connection from the Wannsee Conference to the inauguration of Carter, who was involved in the biggest land issue deal. It's like arguably the third most important year in modern Israel's history because of 1948 and 67 being the years of restoration, but we have the big year where a lot of land was given back to Egypt, including land that the Israelis had developed with oil fields on it, making it valuable. Now, if I recall correctly, the book The Shining, written by Stephen King, was published in 1977, the year Carter was inaugurated. The last 44 days of his presidency coincided with the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which since the 44th president. And Carter was known for attempting to rescue them with Operation Eagle Claw, in which 4 times 4 military personnel died and 4 were injured in a plane crash, because the 44th president will return to the White House through a plane crash. Okay. Anyway, it's amazing because the Wannsee Conference was in 42 and it's 422 months, which since it's 42 to Carter, which just proves everything that I've been saying about Carter and how he is symbolic of King David and the plains of Gaza, and how Carter is Antichrist. Everything about him, all of his politics, it's to fool Christians. His worldview, his Christianity is the false Christianity. If you want to look at what false Christianity is, it's Jimmy Carter. Now, okay, something new here. Totally different. We have this date here. which was the day there was terrorism on the Temple Mount. July 14th, 1917. Sorry, 2017. July 14th, 2017. This was extremely prophetic. Okay, extremely prophetic. Okay, I'll explain. So the terrorism on the Temple Mount cleared the Temple Mount, and then 3 days later, on the 17th, there was a large group of Jews together went onto the Temple Mount and started openly praying on the Temple Mount for the first time. Because Jews aren't allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. They're not even allowed to pray before taking a sip of water, in the name of peace, because the Temple Mount is still technically controlled by the Jordanians. Custodianship is how they call it. But the bottom line is that Arab Muslims are on the Temple Mount, and they don't like Jews praying on the Temple Mount. Well, why is that? Well, because they're with Satan, and they want to prevent the restoration of Israel, which leads to the return of the Messiah. So Satan is doing all he can to prevent it, which, by the way, is the root reason for anti-Semitism, which today comes in the form of leftist politics that is against Israel. It is anti-Semitism, which has, over history, come in all different shapes and sizes, all varieties. It's just the modern variety of anti-Semitism. Okay, so it's 3 days in between these two Temple Mount events, which hints at the third temple, which the Jews want to rebuild, which they will rebuild soon, as a result of activities in the Middle East. Bad activities, negative activities, war, etc. Hence the terrorism in the 3 days to the Jews praying on the Temple Mount. But this day, July 17th, this day, July 17th, was exactly 3 + 3 months before this January 17th date in 2018, when 42 Jews prayed on the Temple Mount. So there was a tour of the Temple Mount of 42 Jews who were being harassed by Arab Muslims. And so in response, the Jews shouted out prayers to the God of Israel. So the Jews openly prayed on this day, but then on this day they shouted prayers after they began getting harassed, and then were quickly escorted off the Temple Mount by Israeli security. But the 42 Jews hints at the Wannsee Conference in 42. But it also hints at the Temple Mount, which was recaptured in 67 on the date 6-7, and 42 is 6 times 7. Because 6, again, is man and 7 is God, and that's where God meets man, the Temple Mount. So anyway, the 3 + 3 months and then 3 days connection here confirms the significance of 3, and this is in context of the Temple Mount, which hints at the third temple. And again, God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. We have 3 sets of 3. Now the thing is about this July 17th date in 2017. It was exactly 49 years, biblical years of 30 months each, after the decree to rebuild Jerusalem on April 1st, 1969. The Temple Mount was captured by the Jews in 67, 50 years before they openly prayed on the Temple Mount in 2017. In the Bible, a 50-year period is known as a Jubilee period and is symbolic. The meaning of a Jubilee is the restoration of the people to their original land and inheritance. And that's why there's this 50-year cycle ongoing in God's prophetic signs. Because 1967, in turn, when they captured the Temple Mount and restored the Temple Mount, or rather East Jerusalem, and gave the Temple Mount back to the Jordanians in the name of peace, that was 50 years after 1917, the year of the Balfour Declaration. And that was 50 years after 1867, when Mark Twain visited Israel and wrote in his first book that made him famous about his travels and his visit to Israel, God must have cursed this land, it's so desolate. Because Deuteronomy chapter 28 speaks of a stranger from a faraway land coming to be a witness to the desolation that's described in Bible prophecy in between the Second Temple's destruction and when the Jews return. In other words, there was nothing there. There were no quote-unquote Palestinians living there. It was vast emptiness. It was a desolate land. The Jews returned right after 1867 when Mark Twain was there as the witness with the first Jewish settlement. And then Jews slowly came back. And then we had the first Zionist conference in 1897, which declared that Israel should be the place where the Jews emigrate and create and establish a nation. And at the time, Theodor Herzl, the leader, said that people will laugh now, but in 50 years, they will know that at this conference, we created the nation of Israel. Exactly 50 years later, well, not exactly, but 50 years later, in 1947, the world recognized Israel as a state on November 29th. Another 50-year pattern. But going back to 1867, that was also a year that the Sultan of the Turkish Empire, after exactly 500 years of rule over the area of Israel, allowed the ability to buy the land from absentee landlords. And so Jews started buying the land. But it was exactly 500 years, which is another hint at the 50-year cycle here, the Jubilee. Now, the reason for going into all of this too here is that this date here connects with 7 times 7 years, biblical years, to the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. Well, we have in the prophecy in Daniel chapter 9 a decree to rebuild Jerusalem, and specifically also its walls. King Suleiman the Great, King Suleiman the Magnificent, I should say, he was the one to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, the Sultan of the Turkish Empire. And that rebuilding of the walls by Suleiman the Magnificent. Okay, so here, this is helpful, this diagram here, in explaining what's going on here. We have this prophecy, the most central prophecy in the Bible, Daniel chapter 9, and this decree to rebuild Jerusalem, given to the prophet Daniel by the archangel Gabriel. And it's for a period of 7 weeks and 62 weeks. But we know in Hebrew the word for week is Shabua, and it simply means a unit of 7. And so it's not literally 7 days that's referred to here with this translation of week. It's 7 times 7 years, which is 49 years. And then there's this 62 times 7 years period combined for a total of, in the prophecy, 490 years. Well, we know from the Royal British Observatory, the decree was given on the 1st of Nisan in the Hebrew calendar, and we know from the Royal British Observatory that that date was March 14th, 1445 BC. And if we add this number of days, 490 years times the 360-day prophetic year, we get exactly the date of Jesus' triumphal entry, April 8th, 32 AD. And we know that that date from the Royal British Observatory was the Sunday before the full moon Passover, which in Christianity is known as Palm Sunday, when Jesus officially arrived on the donkey into Jerusalem in the triumphal entry. We also know from the Gospel of Luke that Jesus began his ministry of teaching and healing people in 29 AD, because it says it was the 15th year of Tiberius who began his reign in 14 AD, so 29 AD. We also know from the Gospel of John that during his ministry, Jesus observed 4 Passovers when he was crucified on the 4th one. And so 29, 30, 31, 32. Jesus was crucified on the Passover in 32 AD, which lines up with this prophecy here. And so for those who think that it was any other year, you're incorrect. Another proof of this, by the way, is that this period of time requires that there be an extra month of Adar, which happens 7 out of 19 years in the Hebrew calendar, and 31 and 33 and 30 do not have an extra month of Adar. Okay, so that's another proof. Anyway, so we have this exact fulfillment to the exact number of days from this prophecy, which is an astounding proof for Jesus and the righteous Christian God of the Bible. But in the prophecy, there is a 70th week. As we can see here, this adds up to 69, right? The prophecy talks about a period of desolation between the 69th and the 70th week. That's the 2,000 years that the land of Israel lay desolate, which then Mark Twain became the witness to the desolation when he wrote in his famous book that made him famous about his travels. By the way, Mark Twain was born and died on the day of a prophetic comet in the night sky. So he was the witness. Oh, and he was the stranger from the faraway land. He was from San Francisco, and he can't get much further away from Jerusalem than San Francisco, especially before the age of airplanes. He would have had to traverse the continent or around the continent back before the Suez Canal, no less. Okay, so now we pick up this parallel here with Suleiman the Magnificent, because this is the year he decreed the rebuilding of the walls, just like Artaxerxes did in ancient Babylon. And we have another 69-week period. We have the 62 weeks to 1969, and then 7 weeks, the 49 years, to the day that the Jews openly prayed on the Temple Mount for the first time, which was exactly 49 biblical years. This leaves us with this mysterious 7 years here for the final 70th set of 7 years. What happened? Well, up until about the middle of 2024, it was believed that the second coming would be in 2024 for a very good reason, because God demonstrated this with this parallel here. Clearly. But what God was doing was demonstrating 7 years of prophetic signs, which the vast majority have been missed, which are explained on this channel. But that's not to say that all of them have been missed. I don't want to sound arrogant or anything. I just want to say that the majority of the signs have been missed, but they also confirm that 2024 was relevant. This is relevant. And it's because, as the signs that have been missed show, there's 2 sets of 7 years, which parallels the 2 sets of 7 years interpreted in the dream by Joseph. The king's dream, symbolic of the Antichrist, and the 7 years in that dream symbolize the period of the Antichrist. So what we have is a 2 sets of 7 years. That's why on the first day of 2025, transitioning from 2024, we had 7 plus 7 deaths in the Ford Lightning truck attack in the 6 plus 6 plus 6th state. And then later in the day, 7 were injured with the explosion of the Tesla. The Tesla is symbolic of lightning. On that day, there were 4 lightning strikes on the 4 iconic places in the 2 cities, New York and Washington, because the 4 planes that struck on 9/11 in New York and Washington, or at least intended for Washington. And anyway, it was a Ford Lightning truck, and it was Ford had 4 lightning strikes that was used to hit the 7 plus 7 people and kill the 7 plus 7 people. Anyway, that's just a confirmation from God that, in fact, this is correct. That this was a 7-year period followed by another 7 years. The second coming will be in 2031, in the autumn in 2021, in October. That's a fact. And the most commonly quoted verse in the Bible is not interpreted correctly. No one knows the day is the verse that people use as an excuse to not follow Jesus' commandment that he repeated to watch for the Lord's signs of his return and the timing of his return. Well, obviously, watching for the timing of his return implies that one will know the timing of his return. Furthermore, in Revelation chapter 3, verse 2, Jesus said, "For if you do not watch, I will come against you at a time you will not expect, at an hour you will not expect. And therefore, if we are watching, we will know the hour to expect him." Obviously. Obviously. There's no other way to interpret that verse. So much for no one knows the day or the hour. Well, what was Jesus referring to then? Well, for one thing, the word know is not the same word in the Greek as the word for know that's used in 3 verses prior, which is the verse that's used for what we would think as being to know. This word for know is actually should be translated as no one has seen. No one has seen the day. But that aside, there's also a parenthesis in the passage. In parenthesis, God speaks of Noah who did know. Jesus refers to Noah who did know. Like all of the other servants in the Bible know of the timing of the impending judgment, such as, for example, Lot. And so, do we expect God's servants to not know the timing of his return? Well, no. That's not the pattern in the Bible. That's not what Jesus meant with the parenthesis of Noah. And obviously there's a purpose to watching for the timing of the Lord's return and watching his signs, which the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians dismiss with the excuse of no one knows the day or the hour. But you see, Jesus did this on purpose. He hid purposefully. He disguised the knowability of being able to know. It's part of the process of weeding out the tares from the wheat. The tares are going to fall for the misinterpretation and the mistranslation because they honestly don't want to watch. They're living lives basically indistinguishable from other non-believers. They don't want to know the timing of the Lord's return. And Jesus also after speaking of this, spoke of the masters of the house, that if they knew when the thief would be coming, would have prevented the thief from coming in. Well, the thief is Jesus. That's clear in the Bible. Jesus is coming like a thief in the night. And the masters are the so-called pastors who, if you even mention anything about the Lord's signs or the timing of his return, you'll be immediately escorted out of the church because of the false doctrine of no one knows the day or the hour. Because the truth is, these so-called pastors are the wolves, they're the hired hand who will leave when the wolf comes. They may be doing a good thing or two and, doing a work, but their role as a pastor is something that Jesus hates. It is the Nicolaitan doctrine. It's part of it. The word Nicolaitan is a cognate from Greek that means ruling over the laity, which is why the pastors will tell you we have no idea what Jesus is really referring to here, even though he mentions it twice in the book of Revelation, which is about our time. And Jesus said he hates it, and we're to expect that Jesus didn't make it clear what he was referring to. Well, no, it's because he was talking about them, which is why Jesus forbid teaching and calling anyone your teacher, and also preaching for money. He forbid calling anyone your teacher and having teachers, which is what a pastor is. It's a pseudonym for teacher. It's the same thing. Don't give me a break. The word pastor means teacher, and so does priest and bishop and pope. But now it is more dangerous than ever to be following a pastor. And when Jesus spoke of the Christs who would come and lead many people astray, he wasn't referring to people who would literally call themselves Lord Jesus Christ, because the word Christ is Greek for Messiah, which is Hebrew for anointed one, and there are other anointed ones in the Bible other than Lord Jesus Christ. And furthermore, in history, there haven't been many Lord Jesus Christs, claiming to be anyway, that have led many people astray. When they have come, people recognize that they are not in mentally sound health. Jesus was referring to people who claim to be anointed by God, the so-called pastors, priests, reverends, and bishops, and popes. Okay, so anyway, the second coming will be in 2031. The prediction in this video, the purpose of it is to prove this, that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is overwhelmingly pointing to this. Because it is a big web, it's an interconnected web, and the center of the web is the second coming, which is at the end of 2031. That's a done deal. When the prediction comes to pass, make no mistake. I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction. Okay? We are in the final 7 years, and the second coming is in 2031. Case closed. July 17th, 2017 was the key date, if you will, in this tetrad of earthquakes. Tetrad of earthquakes. A tetrad blood moon, a lunar eclipse blood moon tetrad is when there are 4 lunar eclipses in a row that all fall on Jewish feast calendar dates with no other lunar eclipses in between. Okay, it's a blood moon tetrad. Okay? The few of these in history, I think there's 8 in the last 2,000 years, coincide with extremely relevant Jewish history. For example, there was a blood moon tetrad surrounding the restoration of Israel in 1948 and 49. And then also in 1967, when Israel recaptured East Jerusalem. Okay? So, they are spaced with 177 days each. Well, that's what gives us this earthquake tetrad, this tetrad of earthquakes. These 4 earthquakes in a row that were all 7.0 or greater, with no other 7.0 or greater earthquakes in between, all spaced 177 days apart, which makes it clearly a sign from God. Because, for example, Jesus said when asked for the signs of his return by the disciples, to look for earthquake signs. This is the quintessential earthquake sign here, this tetrad of earthquakes. Because the restoration, or rather the return of Israel, coincides with the the return of Jesus coincides with the restoration of Israel. You can imagine how you get if you were talking nonstop for a couple of hours here. So, okay, now the thing about this tetrad of earthquakes also is that it ended on the date 110. Which hints at the number 110, which is the age at which Joshua died. Who led the Israelites into the promised land at the beginning of Israel? And this date of this earthquake was 110 days after the Revelation 12 sign in the night sky, which is depicted in the diagram here. And the walls of security of Jericho that Joshua led the Israelites around collapsed due to an earthquake. And then the Jews took Jericho, which was symbolic of taking possession of the promised land. They crossed the Jordan River on the date 110. Joshua died at the age of 110. And then they took Jericho, which collapsed due to an earthquake, the walls. Archaeology proves this. And that's why this earthquake tetrad ends on the date 110. Also on 9/11, 110 stories collapsed and engendered a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, where George Washington, the first president, was inaugurated, who then marched down Wall Street and consecrated the nation to God in Trinity Chapel, the only building at Ground Zero that survived the falling debris. And so through the 9/11 events, God pointed to the chapel, the miracle chapel known today, in order to point to George Washington, who said in the chapel, after he became the first president, the founding of the nation, hence the foundation of Federal Hall, he said, to paraphrase, if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings, which it temporarily did on 9/11 as a warning. Since 9/11, America hasn't come back to God. It has raced exponentially even further away from God, which is why it is about to be destroyed. Which is essentially also what's being warned of here with this tetrad of earthquakes. Anyway, one of the earthquakes falls on this prophetic date regarding the restoration of Israel, when the Jews openly prayed on the Temple Mount, like I said. It was a 7.7 earthquake, no less. Again, it was 7 times 7 years after the decree, exactly, to rebuild Jerusalem. Okay, so this is the earthquake tetrad here. I wanted to show you that to just confirm for you even more the prophetic significance of this date here, and confirm what I had just spoken about, which is how it is this parallel with the most central prophecy in the Bible. And if it is, which it is, I just proved it, therefore we have a 7 years from this, which gets us to 24. But the Lord didn't return in 2024. That's because of 2 sets of 7 years, as alluded to when Joseph was in Egypt. Okay? There you go. So, back to what I was saying here. We have the violence on the Temple Mount, which led to 3 days later Jews being able to openly pray on the Temple Mount, which was exactly 3 plus 3 months before 42 Jews shouted prayers on the Temple Mount. And that's because it hints at the third temple. The number of God is 777. The 7 is the number of God's divine signature upon things. For example, there are 7 continents, 7 stars in the night sky that move around that are observable to the naked eye, 7 notes on a musical scale, 7 levels in a table of elements, 7 metals of antiquity on which civilization is based, and on and on. 7 colors in a rainbow. Okay, God's number, his creation number. All right, now, anyway, Trump is a 777 also, because he was inaugurated in the year ending in 7, at the age of 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days. 73 days, which is 3 sets of 7, after he won the election by 77 electoral votes on the same day that Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, as in Joshua, who led the Israelites around the walls of security in a symbolic 3 sets of 7, was in power for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. And that day was 73 weeks exactly after Trump descended the golden escalator in a Trump Tower. And that was exactly 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. And that's because of Joshua, who led the Israelites in the 3 sets of 7, but also 188 months because 188 hints at H188, the number that God uses frequently in the science to hint at the word in the Hebrew concordance, which means woe exclamation mark. And the Jews shouted when the walls of security collapsed in the book of Joshua. Anyway, the President Donald J. Trump ballroom is equal to 1948, as I explained in Hebrew Gematria, which hints at the hall in the Wannsee Conference in 42, okay? Anyway, we got from the Temple Mount 42 Jews Day, 777% of a year to the ballroom, which again gives us 1948, which gives us Jews because of Hebrew Gematria and the Wannsee Conference in the hall in 42, and that in turn is 7 days before the predicted news of Paul Simon's fall, who, by the way, is Jewish. Okay. Again, this date was 7 times 7 biblical years after the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. Rather than try to finish this tomorrow and just quit for the day, as you can tell I'm getting tired, I just can't. There's just too much. I'm going to just push through, okay? Now, but what I'm saying here is that Paul Simon's predicted death is predicted through the Wannsee Conference and the restoration of Israel. Okay? July 17th, 2017 is 237% of a year, almost exactly, which is at room 237, the most iconic thing in cinema history, arguably, which comes from the movie The Shining. To November 29th, 2019, which was the release of the song that went viral, Jerusalema, by the South African artist Master KG. K equals 11, G is the 7th letter, gives us 18, 6 plus 6 plus 6. Which is why the song was released exactly 66 plus 6 years, or 2 times 6 times 6 years, after the world recognized Israel at the UN with the UN partition plan for Palestine, which the Arabs rejected and the Jews accepted. Because the Jews are not interested in dividing the land, they're interested in kicking the Jews off the land and killing them all in a genocide, because they are led by Satan, because that's the truth behind Islam. Anyway, 2 times 6 times 6, because the 266th Pope is the Antichrist, whose number is 666 in Bible prophecy. Jerusalema is this Antichrist song that the world got behind and did this viral dance song too during the COVID times. And it was known for these videos of these nurses in hospitals, for example, with masks on, which was very Antichrist, dancing in unison, which is symbolic of collectivism, which is Antichrist. The opposite of individualism, which is what the Bible is about, with the free will choice of the individual, which always inevitably gets trampled on, the rights of the individual, because they're by collectivists, and which is antithetical to the Bible, because an individual is created in the image of God, which is how the West and America got its individualism and equal rights in the first place, which are now being eroded and done away with when women have become a majority in the institutions of the society, because women are by nature collectivists and are interested in consensus and are interested in overriding the rights of the individual. And that's why Helen Keller, the famous blind activist, said that she looked forward to the day when women were able to vote because it would inevitably lead to communism. And she was correct. Women should not be in these institutions. They should be at home raising children, not just because for the purpose of them being submissive to men, but because it would make them happier. There may be some outliers that they would be happier with a career instead of having a family, but that's not the case with the vast majority. God created women to have children. That's when they are the happiest, because that's when they are fulfilling what they were created for. They were not created to be in an office pushing paperwork. Okay, that's the truth. Anyway, I mentioned all of that because of this horrific Jerusalem song that had nothing to do with Israel or Jews, but presented Jerusalem as this spiritual capital for the world. And in the end, the world will gang up on Israel and attempt to make Jerusalem an international city, led by the UN and Barack Obama and the Pope. Okay? That's why this Jerusalem song is so antichrist, and it was released exactly 66 years plus 6 years after the UN, the world, recognized Israel with a division plan, and the world will seek to divide Israel and Jerusalem, make it an international city. The big transgression against God, for which the God will judge and destroy the nations of the world at the end of the age, at Armageddon. Okay? All right. So now you know the truth about the CVD disease and the SHOTs and the masks and the collectivism. As Jane Fonda said, the CVD disease was God's gift to socialism and the left. And she was right. Okay? And society is doomed because there's no putting the genie back in the bottle of women being in the majority of the institutions now. I mean, not just being in the institutions, but majority of people in those institutions being women. That's the reason for the epidemic of wokeness is not coincidentally coincidental with the timing of women becoming majority of people in the institutions. And once we have the majority of women in the field of law and judges, for example, you can kiss democracy goodbye, which is what we're doing right now. We're kissing it goodbye because of women. That's the truth. There's actually a recent article that's been published, The Great Feminization. Look it up. It's gone viral. It explains this. Now, finally, we understand it. I mean, it's something that we, those men who have been wise to this, and also women, for years now, but she's put it into words, and she's explained this. And it was a woman that wrote this article, The Great Feminization, and God had to have it as a woman to be able to be the first to articulate this. But that's what's going on. And it is the end of the road for Western civilization because of women, and women not raising families and instead pursuing careers. That's the bottom line. It's the most unprecedented thing in human history, and we cannot put this genie back in the bottle because of, so-called need for two incomes and stuff like that. It's a bunch of BS anyway. It's not true. But what needs to be put in the bottle first, before women go back to raising families, is that the sexual revolution needs to be put back in the bottle. And there needs to be the return of slut shaming and the restriction of contraception. But that can't be done by coercion, of course. It needs to be done voluntarily, and that can't be done voluntarily unless there's a society-wide religious awakening, which isn't going to happen until the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. And so in the meantime, we've got a temporary reprieve with a man in the White House, but that's going to end, and we will have the women in control again, and we will have the end of civilization in the next few years. Now, November 29th, look up the article, okay? Don't just get mad at me. Look up the article, okay? Read it. Now, November 29th, 2019, this Jerusalem song release date was 3 months and 11 days to the date 3/11 with the CVD disease. So, and that's when the song went viral with all of the TikTok videos and of the nurses dancing with masks in unison. Horrific. Support your nurses. Doing their job. I mean, not that they weren't doing their job, but we need to come together. This collectivism. It's the Tower of Babel. We need to come together for this technology, the SHOT. The transhumanism technology of the SHOT is what is symbolized with the technology that's used in Genesis chapter 11 to build the tower to heaven. Attempt to reach God without God. Well, this technology will be used in the near future, and it was used for this purpose too, without people realizing it. It's all an experiment to change people's DNA so that they can reverse aging and achieve immortality without God, to reach heaven without God, like the Tower of Babel. And so the nurses coming together and dancing in unison in the halls of the hospitals and on the roofs of the hospitals, etc., to the song Jerusalem was so antichrist. It was so evil. Okay, so anyway, the thing in Trump's speech on that day was 9 months exactly to the begins with an F and ends with a DA organization approval of the thing, and Trump's speech, and the SpaceX as in mark of the Antichrist, SN9 as in 9 months, and symbolism for judgment. Approval of the thing. Okay, so I've talked about this too many other times in other videos. Let's move on. Duval rhymes with Hall. Okay, and again she connects with the death of Diane Keaton, whose last name was Hall. All right, now here's something amazing. The Wannsee Conference was exactly 900 months before the first inauguration of Trump, the 45th president. 900 being 450 plus 450. There were also 450 false prophets that were defeated by Elijah on the mountain, the high place. Obama means high place. And this was not only the day that Trump came to office, but it was the day that the Antichrist left office. The false prophets left with their defeat. But the number 9 is the most important number in God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. Is from the Bible. The number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. But we have the 900 months exactly from the Wannsee Conference final solution to trumpeting God's signs, and then an exact 390 weeks, which hints at the prophetic 390 days in Bible prophecy, and also is the the word for return in the Greek concordance is the 390th word is the word for return, quoted by the Apostle James, which quotes Amos 9:11, which refers to the quotation, the return of the Lord to rebuild his temple. And 390 is 13 times 3, which again hints at the 133rd ballroom. That's why it connects to the death of Shelley Duvall, which hints at the ballroom in the movie The Shining, which hints at the Trump ballroom and the ballroom in which the final solution was concocted. And again, that day is 470 days before the leak of the name of the ballroom, which is the name of the 47th president. The 900 months exactly to the inauguration of Trump is in turn 4 plus 4 years to Trump's second inauguration, which is in turn exactly 9 months, as in birth pains, to the beginning of the demolition of the ballroom. And again, God pairs 9 and 44. But I already have explained this 4 plus 4 years connection followed by 9 months connection in the diagram earlier in the video, but what I didn't show is this 900 months connection. So the 900 months connects with the 4 plus 4 years. This is the most profound connection in the video, probably. I've definitely connected the ballroom of the final solution to Trump's ballroom. on the demolition of it. Because the 9 pairs with 44, as I explained earlier. The 44th president was inaugurated in 2009. Furthermore, Trump's second inauguration was 4 times 4 years after Obama's inauguration, the 44th president. But we have the 900 months plus the 4 plus 4 years plus 9 months. From the Wannsee Conference in the hall and the mansion to Trump's ballroom in the mansion. If you could sum it up, we've now got this most astounding connection from the Wannsee Conference to Trump's ballroom. Through the building blocks of God's big picture of signs, which point to Obama, who is the Hitler who will conduct the genocide, the final solution for the pesky true conservatives and true Christians. We can also add to this the 11 days, because it pairs the 9 months, as I explained earlier. Again, the 9 months, the inauguration here was 9 months and 11 days after Simon performed in the White House. This 9 months and 11 days after Carrie Underwood's Sound of Silence in the White House during the inauguration is leading to the day Simon is predicted to have fallen and severely injured his head. And when this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove everything that I'm saying in this video. And that's the purpose of the prediction that is from God. And I know the reason for the prediction. And you don't. Okay? And so that's an amazing thing here. We have the one, and Simon is Jewish, by the way. We have the one, and I'm just repeating myself now, I guess. You know what? Hold on a second. Yep, I was right. Paul Simon was born 9 times 11 days before the Wannsee Conference, which is 99 days. And again, the Wannsee Conference connects with 9 months, and then 4 plus 4 years, and then 9 months, and then 11 days to the predicted fall of Paul Simon. And again, Paul Simon is all about pointing to Revelation 9:11 and the demonic possession of people through frequencies, music frequencies. Paul Simon was born in 41 because of Key, but he was born. This is just so astounding. Now we really understand why Paul Simon was born on the date that he was born. It connects to the Wannsee Conference. And Paul Simon is Jewish. So, but also the Wannsee Conference connects with 900, which is why 99 days, which is also 9 times 11 days. And again, from Trump, we have the 2 Trump presidencies, inaugurations, and then we have another 9 months and 11 days. So we have 9 times 11 days, and then 900, and then the Trump president inaugurations, and then 9 months and 11 days to Simon. Oh, wow. Wow. You know, I'm going to be shocked if Paul Simon doesn't fall and injure his head at this time. And again, the injuring of the head is Revelation 9:11 too, because the demonic possession will be through the people's brains. Okay, that's amazing. Now, I already talked about that. Well, the day of, maybe I forgot to mention, the Leo the 14th and Charles the 3rd gives us 17, and the 7 heads and 10 horns of the beast. But the Antichrists will be defeated on the Day of Atonement, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. I probably forgot to mention that. And again, these 2 characters are symbolic of the 2 Antichrists. And they met in the Vatican, the capital of the first of the 2 Antichrists. And again, it connected to when Obama and Francis met in Washington, the other capital of the 2 Antichrists. Now, the media is calling this the deranged, leftist, wicked, lying, mainstream left media is calling the Trump ballroom thing Ballroom Blitz. Okay, but there's a famous song, Ballroom Blitz, that was released on the date 9/14 and 73, exactly 327 months, which is also 27 years and 3 months, another combination of this 237 number, to the birth, or from the birth of Donald Trump. Ballroom Blitz, Trump's ballroom. Does this hint at room 237 from the movie The Shining? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Okay. Ballroom Blitz was released exactly 349 weeks, which is the 70th prime number, before the release of The Shining. The Shining was released on the 70th birthday of Scatman Crothers. And I already explained the prophetic significance of 70. So the Ballroom Blitz was released exactly number with 70 to the 70th birthday of Scatman Crothers and the release of the movie The Shining. Scatman got his name from his music performances. The Ballroom Blitz is, of course, a music song. It's a nickname. Scatman is a nickname for the scat music that he would sing. The Ballroom Blitz song was inspired by one of the band's performances, speaking of Scatman's performances, in which they were persecuted on stage by bottling, which is when they throw bottles. That's persecution. It's deadly. And that's symbolic of the coming persecution through the Antichrist, through things to contact people's skin, which is what's symbolized with the ballroom because of the movie The Shining, which, since it's the Shining movie, which is about demonic possession, and it's what people will get once they've taken the mark, or the thing, the S-H-O-T, the thing that comes into contact with them, just like the bottling. But it was persecution. They were forced to leave the stage because of the bottling. It was persecution for the audience not agreeing with them. The bottling was a result, happens when there's a lineup of bands and one of the bands is not in the same genre as the other bands, usually specifically a metal rock band. And so the band named The Sweet, who created the song Ballroom Blitz after being inspired from their persecution, was forced to leave the stage in a form of persecution, which is symbolic of what I've just been talking about. The ballroom and the Shining and the mark forced on people, etc. People forced to retreating as well. There will be a physical retreating of people into, I assume, red states, red cities, which will then be swooped in on with the National Guard, which is what Trump is laying the groundwork for also. Not that Trump is doing anything evil. He's just trying to fight the evil, but it's God's plan that Trump will set the precedent for sending the National Guard into cities where people are refusing to take the mark. Sanctuary cities. So the left has their sanctuary cities for true evil and destruction of the nation. And then there will be the righteous sanctuary cities for those refusing to take the mark. And then the Antichrist, because the devil inverts everything, does the exact opposite. Will send in the National Guard to the sanctuary red cities where people are holed up who are refusing to take the mark of the Antichrist. Yep. And again, the 327 months hints at room 237, which in the movie is a place of death and a bathtub of blood. Okay? Because the Ballroom Blitz was released 327 months after Trump's birthday. And we know Trump is trumpeting the coming persecution from the Antichrist. And that's why his ballroom blitz connects with the song to his birthday, okay? With room 237. This ties The Shining in together again to Trump, which makes the ballroom of Trump's prophetic and a hint at The Shining. Just more confirmation of it. The bottling incident involving the Sweet Band on January 27th, 1973 was 230 days before their release of Ballroom Blitz, which hints at the basketball president who wore 23, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, which people will be persecuted because they don't take it. Okay. The President Donald J. Trump Ballroom, which again equals 1948 in Hebrew gematria, is the first structural change to the White House since 1948. Stunning. Forgot to mention that earlier, I think. Stunning. Confirmation. Second witness. And as I mentioned earlier, this is how God's big picture of signs works. It works on the principle of second and third witnesses confirming in the matter as the Bible says is required. Trump said the ballroom will accommodate 999 people. Now, God uses this number in his signs to hint at 666, because if you flip 999, it equals 666. And Satan, like I've been explaining, inverts things, flips things upside down. Like, for example, the flipping of the National Guard into sanctuary cities controlled by the left in the Civil War, the politicide, the spiritual war, will be flipped upside down, and Obama will send in the National Guard into the sanctuary cities of the red states after those who refuse the mark. So, and the mark is associated with the number 666. So anyway, Trump said the ballroom will accommodate 999 people. Why did he choose that number? Why didn't he just say 1,000? Because flipped upside down, it's 666. And again, this ballroom will be the symbolic 44th semi-prime room, which hints at the 44th president. Demonic possession is the ballroom symbolism because of the movie The Shining. Now, and that's a result of the mark, which is again 666. Now, Trump said 999 people 9 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall and severely injure his head, which will symbolize the demonic possession of people's brains through the mark, which is 666. That's why the ballroom, 9 days, and the 999 reference, it's just amazing. The sign on October 22nd was Trump hosting the dinner for the donors of the East Wing, as I explained. The sign on the 23rd was the release of the list of donors, and Leo and Charles's coming together at the Vatican, which I explained. The sign on the 24th is that the East Wing was completely demolished, and the leak of the name of the ballroom, the President Donald J. Trump Ballroom. Scatman Crothers died on November 22nd, 1986, 23 years after JFK was shot. And Scrothers died 444 months before the crash at the bridge. Did I already talk about this connection? Let me just check. No, I didn't. But you can see here JFK's crash, 2 times 30 years to the crash at the bridge. And I already explained it, so I'm not going to go into all the details. Again, it was the one of 4 assassinations in the 60s, the year of the popularity of the car that had 4 suicide doors. And it connected with a pairing of 44 here to the 23 number year here to the suicide crash at the $4 million bridge on its way to a KISS concert, 4 letters. So you got that right. Now imagine this in the diagram, okay? We've got 23 years to Scatman Crothers, and then 444 months to this crash. That's another confirmation of the 2 times 30 years and 23 months here. And then again, this 444 months to the crash at the $4 million bridge from the death of Scatman Crothers connects with 23 months. That's a pairing of 144 months and 23 months to Dave Ball and the dinner with the donors of the ballroom. Okay? And then in turn, like I said earlier, 4 plus 4 days in the diagram to Simon's fall, and 9 days to Simon's predicted news of the fall. Okay? So Scatman Crothers' death connects to all of this, and the ballroom. Because Dave Ball, right? Soft cell, like I explained earlier, right? Scatman Crothers is The Shining. He's the guy that explains the concept of The Shining in the movie to the boy Danny. Yeah, wow. And he dies in the movie. He's murdered in the movie. Yeah. Wait a second. Was he hit in the head? Because Jack Nicholson was hit in the head, come to think of it, with the bat by Shelley Duvall. That's something that I recognized before, I'm pretty sure. But the demonic possession is coming through the head, right? That's why Simon will die from a head injury. And but was Scatman Crothers hit in the head too? Or do we even know? Because I think in the movie, okay, no, sorry. He was killed with an axe, but he was the head chef. And you might think that's funny to make that a connection, but I don't. I know God, and it is actually a connection. He is the head chef, which does hint at the head injury that Jack Nicholson, for example, had in the movie, which in turn hints at the coming head injury of Paul Simon, which is in turn symbolism for the demonic possession of people's heads. Okay. All right, now let's see. The Shining movie made $48 million. The President Donald J. Trump ballroom equals 1948, which hints at Israel being reborn in 48. The Shining was released on May 23rd, 1980, exactly 49 months before the Ryne Sandberg game, which is the very famous baseball game in history when player number 23 for Chicago, which hints at the Antichrist from Chicago, who in basketball high school wore number 23, and a parallel with Jordan from Chicago, who wore 23, a goat, as in goat Antichrist. In the game, Ryne Sandberg was the hero because he hit the tying home run in the 9th inning to send the game into extra innings, and then again hit a tying run in the 11th inning. And the Cubs ended up winning 12-11, which hints at on 9/11, the 11th hour. It was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 that flew to the Twin Towers, looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state, because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which referred to the last hour of daylight in darkness in ancient Israel, before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance of time and run out. That's why God pairs 11 and 12 in his signs to hint at the 11th hour going into the 12th hour of darkness. Okay, so that's why the 12-11 final score, but the Sandberg game is the 9th and 11th inning home runs by Ryne Sandberg, number 23. Which gives us 9/11 and also Revelation 9/11. Now, that's just serving to confirm this 490 months. Revelation 9/11 is again symbolism for the demonic possession of people, right? Which is symbolized by the Shining. That's why this connection is valid. Again, 49 is valid because of the prophecy in the 7 times 7. We'd already talked about that earlier. Now, we have this 490 months. Same thing. It's 490 years in that prophecy, if you recall. This is very, very prophetic. From the movie The Shining, its release date. And we haven't talked about yet, by the way, in this video at all, the release date of the movie The Shining. It's about time we do so. And connect it and make it connect profoundly to confirm everything. The release date of The Shining connected with exactly 490 months, extremely prophetic, to this date here, the 23rd of the month in March in 2021, when the Suez Canal ship got stuck. You recall that, the massive ship that got stuck and blocked the Suez Canal, blocking $9 billion of trade per day. The 9 being the number of judgment on the world. This was the world's trade artery. And it was all symbolism because this came out just after the thing was released, which was clogging people's arteries. That's what the symbolism was. Okay, people were getting their arteries clogged because the thing was filled with snake venom, which is what snake venom does. It clogs people's arteries. Now, that's relevant to The Shining, because again, The Shining is about the coming mass demonic possession of people who take the thing. All right, that's very, very relevant. Very relevant. In fact, it proves the significance or the theme of demonic possession associated with the mark of the Antichrist. And if you didn't believe the 490 months was just, if you thought it was just an accident, we had the 49 months connection. And that's the purpose of this Ryan Sandberg game, really. It connects to other things too. And actually, it also connects to, I believe, and I forget how now, but to the Suez Canal ship. But anyway, I talked about that so long ago. Years ago, I made videos with this sort of thing. Well, anyway, the $9 billion in trade that was blocked a day hints at Trump's ballroom, which is being talked about in the news stories as being 90 square feet. And it's controversial because, as it's claimed in the stories by the critics, that it will overwhelm the current White House, which is 55,000 square feet. Now, the thing is, the Suez Canal ship got stuck exactly 55 months to the day that Trump hosted the donors and YouTube donated 22 million on the 22nd of the month here. No. This is the typo. The 23rd is when the list of the donors was released. And when the, and the YouTube, right? And wasn't the dinner, it was just the list of it being released. And I believe the day that, but also the day that Leo and the Charles met, which I already explained. And the Antichrist is symbolized by the king of Egypt. And this sign of the canal ship was in Egypt. And Memphis, Egypt, the king of rock and roll's mansion is in Little Egypt, in Memphis, Tennessee, named after Memphis, Egypt. And Paul Simon travels to it in his song Graceland while traveling up the I-55 highway. And the word Satan is equal to 55, mentioned 55 times in the Bible, as is demon. And New Orleans in the 6+6+6 state, where Simon started his journey, to Memphis up the I-55, then connects to St. Louis, and then Chicago, the home of the Antichrist. That's why this 55 months is relevant, because it connects with the sign in Egypt. And 55 is all about Little Egypt in God's signs, where Memphis, Tennessee is, and the King of Rock's mansion is symbolic of the king's palace in Egypt. Okay, and that gets us to another ballroom sign. The day that the list of donors was released, including the YouTube, which again I explained earlier, was a hint at the lawsuit over the 6th day of the first month, which was exactly 222 weeks after the Night of the Living Steelers was released, and YouTube donated 22 million. Okay, you get the idea. And the two men, Leo and Charles, met, okay, the two antichrists. All right. We got it here. So, in other words, the zombie pandemic is connecting to The Shining through all of this, as you can see here. I could have made a video just dedicated to this, really. This is how special this whole paragraph is here. I hope you appreciate it. I hope you really appreciate what God has done here. He's done so much, including the Rhine-Sandberg game and everything here. The Suez Canal goes all the way back to the release date of The Shining and the 9,090,000 square feet, 55,000 square feet, Egypt, 55 months, to the, okay, it's just amazing. And then it ties all the way back to the Night of the Living Dead and Night of the Living, the zombie movie that started all the zombie movies. And it ends with the symbolism for the Antichrists. It's amazing. All right, here we have Paul Simon connecting to Shelley Duvall. They dated together, and he famously broke up. They met on the set of Annie Hall, which is more hall, mansion symbolism, and they broke up. He broke up with her as she was getting onto an airplane at an airport to film the movie The Shining. Okay, and The Shining stars Scatman Crothers, who battled lung cancer for 4 years and starred in the show Chico and the Man for 4 seasons, in which the guy shot himself in the 3rd season out of the 4 seasons, and his age is 22, which hints at the mark of the Antichrist. His name is Prince, and that hint at the prince who is to come, man of sin also, and that gets us to his son, Prince Jr., Freddie Prinze Jr., and Paul Simon's middle name is Frederick, who starred and became famous through his role in the movie I Know What You Did Last Summer, which revived the slasher movie genre, and which hinted at the pioneering movie of the slasher movie genre, Halloween, starring Jamie Lee Curtis. This movie launched her career. She became known as the Scream Queen, and I Know What You Did Last Summer was made possible because of just prior to it, the movie Scream, which was a parody on slasher movies. And she starred recently in this Freakier Friday movie, a follow-up to the original, which was released on this date 8/8, which was a Paul Simon date, on which we received the prophetic ship signs, as in Revelation chapter 8:8, including the water slide sign as in slip sliding away, and also the guy who fell off of his car, slipped, and car number 88. And this is exactly 3 times 4 weeks to the Friday and the predicted news of Paul Simon's slip and fall and severe injury of his head, a blunt fall, hence that was slasher, a blunt force, concussion, etc. And 3 times 4 weeks because of Paul Simon's Wednesday morning 3 a.m., which gives us the 3 and the 4 for 3 transgressions and for 4 symbolism. But it's a day of the week, Wednesday, and so is a Friday. So that's also why this ties and connects. And it all connects. So it all connects. This is a profound thing. It's 3-dimensional, as is God's designs are. Just like the Bible isn't a linear document. It's a 3-dimensional document that one can take an infinite number of pathways through. But we can see here that God has aligned all of these things to connect to each other, to point to Paul Simon's predicted fall. Now, here, we talked about it earlier. I just wrote it again here. But the Wannsee Conference was exactly 500 plus 500 months, and then 5 months to Trump's ballroom. The Wannsee Conference was in a ballroom. 500, again, is the number of the word in the concordance for Antichrist. And again, on this day, Mr. Dorr died, and Leo Pope went outside the walls to the walls of Basilica. And this was exactly 44 months, because Dorr is number 4 in the Hebrew alphabet, the 4th letter, to the predicted first use of the new ballroom by the 44th president. And so we have the Wannsee Conference final solution connecting with the predicted first use in a presidential inauguration of the ballroom by the 44th president. That's amazing. And it connects through the number that means Antichrist. Okay? And yeah. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Paul Simon was born 9 times 11 days before the Wannsee Conference, and the Wannsee Conference is the final solution. And also we have coming the mass zombie pandemic as a result of possession of people's brains, which is symbolized by Revelation 9:11. And again, this Wannsee Conference connects with 900 months to Trumpet's inauguration, and this is 99 days to the Wannsee Conference. But that was explained earlier. But also, it's 3 months and 7 days. And again, it's 9 months and 900 months exactly to Trumpet, who is a 3 sets of 7. Again, he was inaugurated on the year ending in 7, and he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.